we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Just glad to have you. As you know, I'm going to start over. I had like 3. All right, here we go. Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks for tuning in. Always glad to have you. Always have fun doing Shane Plays Geek Talk. And even though the name is Shane Plays, and today's topic is on gaming, it's not always about gaming. It's just when I play. It's the fun stuff I like to do. Movies, comic books, video games, tabletop games, role-playing games. If it's geeky, it goes. And today, got a returning guest and friend who is no stranger to the show whatsoever, and that is Russ Morrissey, a.k.a. Morrus of E.N. Publishing. Russ, how the heck are you?
Hello. Hey, so what's this, like my third time? Maybe even
fourth.
More. Maybe fourth.
Yeah, you're definitely a returning guest.
Well,
You're
legally speaking, after 4 times, I'm officially a co-host now. That is the podcast law.
With all of the rights and privileges, I'll have to get your membership card in the mail to you. So, no, you're always welcome on the show. You know, and you've got your own show, which is I'm going to get it wrong.
You are going to get it wrong. I know you are.
Yeah, Morris's unofficial RPG news talk.
That is so wrong.
Maybe I'm getting it wrong on purpose to give us a chance to talk about it and reinforce the name.
Yeah, but now you're going to ask me to try and say it, and I'll forget it now. I'll blank on it myself.
To say it now.
Okay, Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG talk. There we go. I got it.
There we go. And it is
normally when I introduce my podcast, I literally have to have it up on the screen in front of me and read it.
So you can read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And then, of course, your website is Morris's unofficial RPG news.
Morris's unofficial tabletop RPG.
Tabletop.
Yes.
Got to get the tabletop in.
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise you get all these video game RPGs, you see? You've got to put tabletop these days.
Yeah, I've noticed that TTRPG is becoming
Back in the day, you just say role-playing games, and that basically just meant D&D and tabletop stuff. These days, role-playing games means video games, so you've got to say tabletop.
These confused video gamers. Yeah. Now, I play both. But I did want to say that, mangling of names aside, people definitely, if they're interested in tabletop RPGs at all, on any level, they need to be visiting your site and getting all the latest news. It's like the largest RPG news site out there, right? Tabletop RPG.
Well, there aren't that many RPG news sites out there, to be fair. It's not that much of a claim to fame. There's a lot of board game news websites, or ones that just cover all of tabletop gaming, but devoted RPG news, tabletop RPG news websites. There aren't that many.
Okay. Well, yours is the biggest. Darn it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Darn it all. It's the biggest.
That's only because I have it on a really big monitor, like.
Oh, that's
when I look at it on my phone, it's actually the smallest.
So if I want to make Shane Plays a bigger bog, I don't want it to be a swamp. I want it to be a blog. I just get a bigger monitor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the secret. After all these years, I've been going.
Get yourself a projector and just put it on the side of the house or something.
Yeah, rent a drive-in movie theater.
Man, that is a big blog.
Yeah, whoa, that's huge. Yeah, I can claim I've got the biggest blog in the world. Projected on the moon. Yes. Just get a really powerful projector. But anyway, if people are interested in tabletop RPGs on any level, check out the website and then also the podcast that Russ does. They're both great, and I really, as much as I love podcasts and talk radio and all that, there's only 2 or 3 podcasts I listen to diligently, and I don't miss an episode. And Russ's tabletop RPG news talk podcast.
Whatever it's
let's just say Russ's podcast.
All right,
I'll link it in the show notes. Is great. It's a mix of, you get the news, you get the tabletop RPG news of the day, and then you get you have a topic or a guest, and it's always good. And it's one of my main ways to keep up with what's going on.
In fact, you've been a guest on it more than once.
Yeah, more than once.
Actually, you co-hosted a few times as well.
Mm-hmm. I always enjoy it. So whenever you need me, just flash the Shane Plays signal
onto the moon. Yes,
onto the moon.
Onto the moon, and you'll know.
And I'll come running. Yeah.
First, you'll look up and go, "Oh my God, that's a big blog," and then you'll come running.
That's the world's biggest Shane Plays signal. So anyway. Speaking of flashing stuff into the sky, on a non-gaming related news, we've got here in the States, I don't know what's going on in the UK, but today Zack Snyder's Justice League has dropped on HBO Max.
Yeah, it's hit Sky TV, which is quite a really weird thing happened. So I set it to record.
Yeah.
Like earlier in the week, as soon as it popped up on the planner, I set it to record. Apparently, someone messed it up over the whoever it is who does all these things, and everyone who set it to record actually got a Sarah Jessica Parker film instead.
Oh no!
Just imagine how disappointed you'd be.
Are there people rioting in the streets?
I can hear it. I can hear it. So I guess they're gonna have to show it again. I guess I don't know what they're doing because it's not like
so it's not streaming. It's broadcasting.
I don't know. I don't think it's on demand. I think it was on at a specific time, which is unusual these days. But I don't know. I don't know. Is the answer to your question? I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting because here it's on HBO Max here, which means you can just stream it.
Yeah.
Whenever you want.
It probably is. Yeah. I don't know though.
Well, anyway, I know you're a big Batman fan, so I didn't know if you were. Oh, I know you're like a superhero movie fan in general, right?
Yeah.
So I figured.
I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah, I want to see it. I heard, and at first I was disappointed in this, but then I found later that it was Zack Snyder's preference. It's in a 4:3 aspect ratio, the entire movie.
Is it?
So it's not widescreen. And at first I thought, well, that's messed up. Maybe it just has something to do with the footage. That was how they had to do it because of the footage
is
they
that
had
like
left
IMAX? Is that what that is?
Yeah, he did it on purpose so that it would be perfectly shot for IMAX.
Right.
And then also, there's an article I'll link in the show notes that people can look up later. But Zack Snyder wanted to do it because he felt that superhero action usually happened more in the horizontal rather than the vertical. So he's got kind of a reasoning there.
Well, what I could do then, I could get my TV, if I get a saw, if I saw down the edges...
It'd be perfect.
It'll be perfect. Yeah, brilliant. I'll do that. Perfect. I'll do that later.
I mean, that's a worthy goal for... sacrificing your TV for Zack Snyder's Justice League is definitely a worthy goal. It's... I'm looking forward to it. Now, I'm on record... This is like the geek. I'm on record with the like anybody cares what my opinion is on Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I like his movies. I really do. I just don't like his vision as the main vision for the DC movies. So I see him as Elseworlds. You know what I mean? But he does fun movies, and I really want to see his version of.
So I'm one of the very, very few people who really seems to like Man of Steel. I think it's a really good movie, and everybody I say that to shouts at me for saying that and tells me how awful Man of Steel is. And
it's not awful. I really like it a lot.
It's a good film.
I like it a lot. It's just like I said, his style, Zack Snyder's approach to the DC universe is really really fun and entertaining, but it's also kind of dark and cynical. So like I said, it's just not my preference for the main DC storyline, but as an Elseworlds or just as entertainment, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Now, my one beef, I have two beefs with Man of Steel. I have two beefs. One is where
it's like the Spanish Inquisition, and you're going to go, 3 beefs. I have 3 beefs.
Yeah, I might go into a third beef. But he muted the colors. He did mute the colors. I've seen comparisons side by side where it showed his version versus like the more restored color, And I prefer, for Superman or whatever, more bright colors. And then having Superman have to kill at the end was not my favorite thing.
But he always does that, though. Superman 2...
Yeah, where they fell into the...
Not only that, he's so much worse in that. So what happens... They go into the, Fortress of Solitude.
Right.
He tricks Zod into getting depowered, yeah?
Right.
So now Zod has no powers. Then he takes Zod's hand, he slowly crushes it, torturing the guy, lifts him into the air, chucks him to his death into a pit, turns around and winks at Lois. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, but see, that was allowed because it was the 80s. I don't know. But it's funny. As a kid, you never really catch that.
Yeah.
But then as an adult, you're like, whoa, and then...
he tortures and murders Zod when Zod has no powers. I mean, that's bad. Yeah. There's
also another thing I caught later as an adult where they're doing the thing, this is in Superman 2, where he has multiple copies of himself, and one of them is like made out of stone, and there's multiple Supermen.
Yeah, like the holograms.
Yeah, and he goes, I was always terrible at this as a kid. And it's a funny joke, but he would have never played that as a kid because he didn't grow up on Krypton.
That's true. That is also true. Yeah.
So but anyway, it was a nice line. Anyway, so we're both excited about the 4-hour sprawling monument to comic book movies.
See, I'm not going to get to see it till at least tomorrow anyway, because my Pathfinder 2 game is on tonight, so that's my evening taken up.
Are you still enjoying Pathfinder 2?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Like it a lot?
Yeah.
I've heard that, and this doesn't surprise me, that there is a splinter of Pathfinder 1, almost like Pathfinder 1 was a splinter of D&D 3.5. I've heard somebody's starting.
Yeah, somebody is. Yeah,
which doesn't surprise me.
I haven't really looked into it, but it was going to happen, wasn't it?
It was inevitable. So, all right, is Pathfinder still doing first edition and second edition stuff,
or are they? So.
They're just doing second.
I think they did. I think they overlapped it for a bit, and now I think they phased it all through to. I think. Don't hold me to that. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're not.
All right. Well, I'll find somebody with the biggest RPG news website in the world and ask them. I'm just messing with you. You can't know everything. So anyway, well, let's talk about the main thing we're here to talk about today is you have a really cool project that you're working on under the E.N. Publishing banner, and it's called, I don't think the final title is formalized yet, but its subtitle is Advanced 5e. Is that right? How would you?
Yeah, the final. Yeah, we're going to go with Level Up for the full title. In fact, we're just looking into applying for the trademark right now.
Cool. So it is going to be Level Up.
Yeah, it wasn't originally. It was just going to be like a working title. But sometimes the working title just gets so stuck in your brain, you can't really imagine calling it anything else. And now Level Up is just its name now, so we might as well just stick with it.
Well, it's almost like Star Wars almost was called Blue Harvest, right? Wasn't that the working title?
Was it? They should have kept that.
I think it was Blue Harvest, yeah. Totally would have been better.
Or Blue Milk. Harvest. They should have called it Blue Milk.
Blue Milk. Yeah. Adventures in Blue Milk. Blue Milk Farm.
Yeah.
A galaxy far, far away. So it's Level Up : Advanced 5e, Advanced 5th Edition.
Yes.
And we definitely want to talk about that. It's a backwards compatible yet standalone 5th edition game.
Yes.
Based on 5th edition, which adds all kinds of options and cool stuff to 5th edition, but also is backwards compatible so that you can play existing 5th edition adventures and whatnot with it. And I do want to get to that. That's going to be the bulk of what we're talking about today. But you've got a lot of stuff going on with E.N. Publishing in general right now. It seems like you're definitely in a growth/expansion phase.
Hiring people. It's scary. I have people I have to pay. It's terrible.
Payday. Yeah, payroll is becoming a thing, a real thing. And I want to salute you. You've talked about on your podcast. I guess that's where you go around and just podcast about people's pads. I don't know. But this is a podcast about gaming where You've talked before about how, treat freelancers well, pay a good rate, pay them. You've got an entire podcast you did with your co-host Peter where you went into, how you approach the freelancing aspect of the role-playing game industry. But you pay good rates, you pay on time, you pay somebody commented the other day that this is almost like having a real job, the way that you take care of people. So, and by real, they meant non-freelancing, like you treat freelancers very well. So I just wanted to give you a big thumbs up for that. So, but anyway, so what's going on with E.N Publishing right now? I know you're working on Level Up. You've got the Awfully Cheerful Engine coming out. You're dropping Kickstarters every couple of weeks.
Yeah, so your listeners are going to enjoy this bit of video, visual podcasting. So this here, which you can see but they cannot, is the third Awfully Cheerful Engine book.
Yeah.
So
and it's like, it's a little. What size would you describe that as?
It's kind of comic book size.
Yeah.
It's kind of half letter, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's small, and then this is the inside in there. Look.
Yeah.
So, Awfully Cheerful Engine, it's a kind of rules light action comedy RPG, and the core rulebook is basically a comic book size 30-page really small thing. And then there's a number of adventures, and each one of those is standalone. So the first one was, and they're all like parodies of something. So the first one was a parody of Ghostbusters. This one, Montana Drones and the Raiders of the Cutty Sark, is an Indiana Jones parody.
Right.
And then the next one's going to be kind of like a sort of weird science, Stranger Things kind of parody, like 80s kids on bikes and weird stuff going on. And then we got a Star Trek parody called Beam Me Up coming. And all of those are like 30-page comic book-sized adventures, which you can just run in a single session. And that's it. There's no advancement, no campaign. Single session, you're done.
And it's meant to be very fun, light in tone.
Yeah, very silly, irreverent action comedy, fun. And, just looking at kind of like the tropes, like the Star Trek one, or just make fun of all of the tropes of that genre.
Right. My impression of it, it's not a copy of the West End Games Ghostbusters, but it kind of has that fair, I don't know if rules light is the right description, but it's kind of quick to get in and start playing.
I kind of call it a love letter to that game. So it's not exactly the same, but it definitely has a lot of similarities. And I've actually asked Sandy Peterson if he'll write a foreword for me, and it looks like he's going to, which is rather cool.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, Sandy Peterson, of course, he wrote the Ghostbusters RPG for West End Games back in the day, and he was also one of the level designers for the original Doom video game.
I didn't know that.
And he does and I think he does a lot of Call of Cthulhu stuff.
Yeah.
So Sandy Peterson's definitely no slouch in the industry, so nice that he's going to write you. I'd like to talk to him one of these days, actually. He seems like a really neat guy. So, so good on you. So that's Awfully Cheerful Engine, and I know you're still tweaking and working on the website and this and that and the other, but when do you think that that will see the publication light of day?
I'm hoping for a Kickstarter this summer, early summer.
Okay.
And then, like with all of my Kickstarters, the publication will be like straight after that. Yeah,
that's the thing. When you do a Kickstarter, the minute the Kickstarter ends, the rewards go out. So if you get PDF rewards or something, you get them. Which I think your record's 6 seconds now. If I
something like that.
Yeah, to get them out, and then everything's already done. So it's not that you collect the Kickstarter money and then go make the thing. You start shipping it out and, printing it.
Yeah, well, the digital versions go out immediately. Physical stuff, you wait for the Kickstarter funds to come in and then you place the order to produce them and ship them out. So,
right.
Because obviously you can't do that until you've got because, printing and shipping costs money. So you have to wait for that one.
And speaking of Kickstarters, you have, is it Adversaries and Allies or Allies and Adversaries?
Allies and Adversaries right now, yeah. And it's another one of my quick starters. So this is my 8th or 9th 9th, maybe, quick starter.
Yep.
And these
now, didn't you post something the other day that if you add up all your Kickstarters, you're approaching $1 million?
So I'm hoping this one will push it over. I'm 18,000 short of $1 million.
Yeah, you'll get there.
If not this one, the next one.
That's great. So that's fantastic. You've definitely learned the art of the Kickstarter. And I remember you told me that, or no, you didn't tell me, I heard on your podcast, there was somebody that inspired you on how to do your Kickstarter.
Oh, it's Phil Reed, yeah. Well, he does a lot of really short, small stuff. And he kind of pioneered that, like 20 years ago when Drive-Thru-RPG, wasn't even 20 years ago, but when that started up, he was selling like 99-cent PDFs. And he put a new one on Drive-Thru-RPG every single day. And he did that for about 2 years, and he did really, really well with it. Yep.
Yeah, I remember you were talking to him on your podcast, and you were like, "You inspired me, sir." So, yeah. Well, is there anything else interesting? I know that you just hired a community manager.
So this is an interesting one because Sarah Elsom is her name, and she'll be coming aboard from next month. And her job is to do like community and media stuff. So it's going to be videos. We're going to have like a monthly E.N. Publishing news show, which we're going to stream.
Nice.
So lots of video content. I mean, we're not 100% sure yet how that's going to manifest itself. She is more expert in this topic than I am, which is kind of why I hired her. So to an extent, I'm going to be kind of taking some lead from her on that. But
are you going to get like a news desk set and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, some really dramatic music as well. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, dun, 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 breaking news. Dun, 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 dun. Modifius has just acquired itself. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. So that, and also expanding onto like social platforms like TikToks and things that I don't even know what they are. So those, I know what a Twitter is and I know what a Facebook is, and that's basically all I know. I don't even have an Instagram, so.
You're gonna be reaching those crazy kids with their sock hops and their transistor radios. You're going to get out to the youth of today.
Well, the only thing I know about TikTok is, did you see the sea shanty stuff?
No, but what was it? Evidently, that movie, The Lighthouse, has kicked off a resurgence of sea shanties,
really?
Evidently. Yeah.
Well, this is some guy on TikTok who just recorded himself singing a sea shanty. And then the way TikTok works is you can add your own stuff to that. And so other people started doing it at the same time and just adding their own sort of video layer to it. Until in the end, you had something like 30 odd people all singing this sea shanty together.
Sea shanty.
Yeah. It was amazing. And the guy got a record deal off of it as well.
Wow, weird. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, people, they grumble about social media, but social media has good aspects. There's a lot of fun stuff that comes out of it too. It never fails to amaze me. The creativity, that, and the stuff that catches, there's people that they probably spend 3 months crafting this perfect thing. Yeah. And it gets like 10 views.
Yeah, exactly.
And then some guy just randomly turns on his TikTok. It does a spontaneous sea shanty, and the next thing you know, he's getting a record deal. Yeah. So, my YouTube video that has the highest views was completely spontaneous. I turned on the camera and I ranted. Of course, it was a rant for 7 minutes, and then I shut the camera off and went about my business. And it's garnered the most. It's just. And there's other stuff I spent hours.
So which one was that then?
I did a geek rant about stuff that I didn't like that was happening with Captain America years ago.
Oh, okay.
And it went nuts. So, but I actually try to avoid negative stuff. I don't really like to get negative on stuff. That was just a very spontaneous thing. I was like, I just and then I turned the camera off. And of course, because it was negative, it garnered.
That's the problem, though, isn't it? Because there's so much negativity out there, and part of the reason for that is negativity attracts controversy and attracts views. Whereas if you go on YouTube and just talk about stuff you like, no one really seems to be that interested in that because it's not exciting enough.
Well, what I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I've been doing Shane Play stuff since 2013, and I very much have gotten into the place where I'd rather have 100 followers that really we sync up and really get into what each other are saying than 1 million based on something manufactured or that I'm just following the trends of the day. I want to enjoy Shane Plays. I want to have fun with it. And, so yeah, I just follow my nose, and the people that come along with me is great. So, okay. Anything else going on with E.N Publishing that you would like to toot its horn?
Not that I can announce right now. There is something else, but I'm not allowed to announce it right now. So
that's exciting.
So yeah, it's mainly Level Up and Awfully Cheerful Engine are the two big things going on right now.
Okay, those are the new big things, but you've also got Wine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's going on in the background. There's a couple of is it bestiary or bestiary? Bestiary, isn't it?
I say bestiary,
is it bestiary?
When I just read it in my head, but I think it's bestiary.
Well, whichever one it is, we've got a couple of those coming.
Yeah. So
that'll be fun. So I'm hoping that will be by the end of the year. A fantasy one and a sci-fi one. So they're coming out for Wine. And also there's The Possessed, which is basically The Exorcist. So it's a really creepy horror sort of adventure. Nice.
Yeah, Wine, for people that don't know, Wine is an acronym for What's Old is New. And it's kind of a system. It's a system, not a setting. You can play fantasy, you can play it's Wine and then Now and then New.
Yeah, so there's
new is like sci-fi.
Yeah, so there's a fantasy book, a modern book, and a sci-fi book. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And so it's you can run anything you want in it. In fact, one of your awfully cheerful engine adventures, Spirits of Manhattan, which is a huge love letter to the Ghostbusters, actually was a Wine adventure first, which I've run and had a ton of fun with. So, and then you've also got the Judge Dredd and the Worlds of 2008.
That's trucking along. Yep.
Yeah, looking great. So, okay, all right, and then you have a couple of a project or more that you can't discuss.
Yes, yes, I do.
But on your news show, where you have an anchor and a news desk and all that, you'll do a breaking news segment. You'll hack the internet, and your video will go out there.
I'll have to just put my hand to my earpiece and just make it look like the news is coming. Yeah. And then you'll announce it. Yeah. So, or what you'll actually do is you'll say you'll hack the internet and you'll appear on everybody's screens at the same time. Wow.
And you'll say, and then you'll put your finger to your ear with your little earpiece, and you'll say, "Wait!" You say, "I have an announcement that a couple of weeks from now we're going to have an announcement."
My favorite thing.
Yeah. And now back to the regular scheduled news.
I would like to announce the date on which we're going to release the date on which we're going to create a teaser trailer.
Yeah. Well, it must work. It must build hype because they keep doing it.
I guess so.
Yeah. And So anyway, all right. So let's talk about Level Up Advanced 5e. Now, I'm going to quickly say what it isn't.
Okay.
And then I want you to explain what it is.
Okay.
So
there's a lot of things that it is.
Yeah, there's one of the things that it is not.
Just one of the things that it's not. You're not going to list all of the things that it's not.
Well, I'm just going to say one of the things. Just one of the things,
okay.
Yeah, and it's not a beef. I have no beef.
It's not. It's also it's not beef.
Yeah, it's not beef. It's not consumable. It's not edible in any way whatsoever.
Unless your name is Hudson and you're my dog.
And then he will chew it up. Yeah. Many couches have fallen to the might of Hudson. So Hudson is, of course, Russ's dog, who's an unofficial mascot for Russ's podcast because he shows up on the podcast a lot. Okay. So what Level Up Advanced 5e is not, it's not just more stuff for 5e as you know it. Like what I mean is it doesn't take you from, it's not like okay, now you can go from level 21 to 50
no, it's not that.
The existing 5e. That's not what it is. So having explained what it's not, Russ, why don't you tell us what Level Up Advanced 5e is, which, and let me say, this is to introduce people to what's coming. A few months down the road, there will be a Kickstarter. This is not available right now, but I think that the project is so interesting. I wanted to get people aware of it now so that when the Kickstarter came along, they could just be right. Yeah, the Kickstarter's here. Let's do it. So tell us about Advanced 5e.
Okay, so you don't want me to tell you what it's not. You want me to tell you...
Well, you can if you want. I mean, it's not...
I'm going to list all of the things that it's not first.
It's not
everything
bread,
that it's not. So it's...
It's not an air molecule.
It's going to take a while. How long do we have? Okay, so what it is... So, right. 5th edition. Everyone knows what 5th edition is. So 5th edition, but with an extra level of depth to it. So I don't want to say it's like more complicated because I don't think it is, but there's an extra layer of depth for people who have played 5th edition for a while and just want a little bit more from it. Just because one of the things that I've discovered when you play 5th edition for sort of like 5 years or so, you kind of think, I'd like it if my characters were a little more customizable on the mechanical front, or if combat was just a little bit more tactical, and it's not like super complex or anything, but it just adds that extra layer to it, which just makes the game that little bit more in depth. So when you create characters at every single level, you're making a meaningful choice as you go up in levels. So each time you go up a level, you've got something to look forward to, and each time you're choosing something as well. Right.
So every level advancement is something to look forward to.
And of course the other thing
I got to go 3 more levels before I get that thing.
Yeah. And of course the other thing we've done is like D&D is ostensibly divided into 3 pillars, just the combat pillar, the social pillar, and the exploration pillar. And we kind of felt like the exploration pillar could do with a bit more to it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion. I've seen a tremendous amount of discussion. And just so people know, just full disclosure, I am on the writing team. I'm not I don't. There's 2 or 3 levels of developers.
Yeah, I don't know what they are either. Mike made them up, and I'm like, whatever. I don't know what they mean, but okay.
Yeah, I'm not a primary developer, but I have been doing some writing tasks and been privy to the conversations, and that was another reason I wanted to do this show, because when you announced Level Up, I approached you, Russ, and I said, hey, I would love to learn. I'm fascinated with the business side and the hands-on side of the RPG industry. Would you consider allowing me to be part of the team? And you graciously said yes. So I've been doing some writing tasks, which has been extremely cool. But I've also gotten to see there's so much coordination and so much work and so much discussion and so many tasks. I knew it would be bigger than I thought, but it's even bigger than I thought it would be. There's a lot. It's a tremendous amount of creativity, discussion, and herding of the cats and herding of the tasks.
And right now, that's all just in the writing sort of phase of it.
Right.
There's so much more to it than that as well. There's art going on. There's layout going on. There's
Right. Yeah. It's the amount of. And Mike Myler is kind of heading up the project, who he does, what's the weekly column he does on E.N.
Mythological figures.
Yeah. He'll convert a fictional or historical figure into 5e stats. And I've had him on the show before. And he also does Vast Cavia and some other stuff on his own. Now, does he help with the Insider too?
Yeah, he's editor of Insider, so that's our weekly 5e magazine. So there's a sort of 4 to 5 page article which goes up every week on that. And so he's the editor of that.
That's a Patreon.
That's on Patreon.
That's a Patreon thing, right? Okay, yeah, the Insider. So you can get all kinds of cool 5e content. But anyway, he's having to herd the cats. And, we've been... Well, one thing that people might not know, just to kind of show the nuts and bolts side. So to do this kind of project, you use the OGL from Wizards of the Coast, which allows you, and they have an OGL and an SRD system reference document. Yeah. So there's some stuff that you're legally allowed to use from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Yes, that is correct.
But one thing you cannot do is you can't use any of their IP, their intellectual property. So you basically have to rewrite the descriptions and lore for your own
To an extent.
thing,
I
right?
mean, the SRD basically contains, like, take a spell, for example, contains the spell. You can, if you want, just copy and paste that spell and republish it. We've chosen not to do that because we want the entire book to be in our own words. We want it to be our book. So, so we're not copy and pasting anything at all from the SRD. Although we are using the OGL to access certain, names and terms that we need.
Right. Yeah, so it's, again, Advanced 5e is a standalone game.
Yeah, you don't need the original 5e books. It's completely standalone.
But it's backwards compatible. So, for example, if you had one of the adventures, the published,
So you've got.
I'm just going to throw something out there.
So you've got Curse of Strahd.
Curse of Strahd.
And you want to play Curse of Strahd. You can do that using Level Up, and you don't have to convert anything. It all works. It's the same. It is 5e. It is the same game. It's not. You're not learning a new system. If you know how to play 5e, you know how to play this. It's just it just has a little bit of extra depth to it.
Okay, so just want to. But you can, you can play it on its own without owning the 3 core rule books from 5e. Or you can own all that stuff and play them in parallel or whatever.
Or you can mix and match stuff. You can take a character from O5e, as we call it, original 5e, the current 5e published by O5e and A5e. It's just, I don't know. I don't know if it'll catch on or not. I've been trying to make it catch on, and I've seen
it's
other people
catching
use
on
it.
in the internal discussions. It's catching on. So it's definitely among the team. It's catching.
But
on.
you can totally use a monster from O5e, or you can use a character from O5e in A5e, and it will work perfectly fine.
And then let's talk a little bit about, because one of the main things that I'm seeing with a lot of discussion and a lot of creativity going into is the exploration pillar. And as you mentioned, Wizards of the Coast itself has been, for the past few years, talking a lot about the 3 pillars of D&D. Exploration, combat, and social. Well,
that was the original design brief, wasn't it? Going back to the playtest periods when they were, before 5e even existed, those 3 pillars were there. And they were,
when it was D&D Next.
Yeah, D&D Next. Yeah.
D&D Next. So, and I think it's fair to say that either the exploration pillar just doesn't get as much visibility, or it's not as rich as the other 2 pillars, and in O5e, existing 5e. And so tell us about some of the stuff that's happening with.
So we've done so much work on the exploration pillar. Yeah. I mean, it is as big as the combat pillar now. So,
well, lay it on us.
I don't even know where to start. So, exploration is not just journeys through wilderness. It also involves wandering around a city or, sneaking through a dungeon or whatever. So exploration,
or your own bedroom if you're a messy housekeeper.
So it's all of that. So it's not literally just trekking across hills and plains.
And I think that's what most people think of it as, is like the wilderness.
I mean, that is a big part of it, and journeys are definitely a big part of the exploration pillar, which is why we've got an entire journey system, which I'm super excited about. And the way this kind of works is you have regions. And I always try to use sort of like Lord of the Rings as an example, because people know what these places are. So the Shire is a region. Like Mirkwood is a region. Moria is a region. So they're just like distinct kind of geographical areas that share qualities. So when you travel, you are in a region, and each region has its own tier. So the Shire might be sort of like a tier 1 sort of country shire. Whereas Mirkwood might be like a tier 3 Feywood or a tier 2 Feywood or whatever. So we've got about 15 different region types, and each one of those can be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4, which are the standard D&D adventuring tiers.
So that's actually
60.
So that's 60 different types of
and that's just the ones we're putting into core book. The idea is that's design space that you can have as many as you want. You can do underwater ones and, outer space ones if you want, whoever. But, you can do as many as you want. So you've got these regions.
Okay, wait a minute. Official. I'm touching my ear. Spelljammer is no. I'm just joking. I'm not going to start that rumor. Anyway, go ahead.
So those regions are already a really easy toolkit for a GM to world build, to create their world. They can put a tier 3 mountainous region here, and they can put a tier 1 swamp here, and just by saying that, you've already got a ton of information about the world. You know what the encounter tables in that area are, because there's encounter tables geared to that tier and that terrain type already. The environmental rules, like if you're like a tier 3 frozen waste, you already know what the effects of blizzards and snow and that sort of stuff is, because that's all there in the tier, in the region description. So that's all there in one place.
And see, I like that, because that's always one of the things as a GM or DM, whatever, that I'm like, they're in a snowy area, and I know there should be some kind of effects here, but I just don't have time to look it up or, to create it.
So we put them all in one place. Basically, you'll have one page, and it will say, like, Arctic Wasteland or something. I can't remember what we call it. I think it was Arctic Wasteland. Arctic Wastes, Frozen Waste, something like that. Frozen Wastes was it. And Frozen Regions, Frozen something. Anyway.
Frozen something.
So we called it that, because these kept getting their names changed. And it's like one page, and it's got everything you need. Encounter tables, it's got terrain descriptions, it's got environmental rules. Everything on there that you are going to need is right there on that one page for a frozen waste.
And so, you would also have mid-sized city? I mean, you have what, when you say it's like cities or this or that, do you have regions for if you're in a city?
Yeah, we've got cities, we've got little country shires, which are villages with surrounding farms and stuff. That's like
and the main encounter there is a
barrel roll,
is a hobbit wife. Is a hobbit wife glaring at you for
basically, and that sort of thing. It might be like a bear coming out of the woods or something is threatening the village. And then, of course, we've got the journey rules, and this is where we bring in what we call our exploration challenges. So these are sort of terrain or event-based encounters which have a challenge rating and an experience points award, just like a monster encounter would. But it might be, at the low end, it might be like a broken bridge going across a river. At the low end. And at the high end, it might be you come across the corpse of a god and all the weird stuff, like in a tier 4.
Wow.
If you're like a 20th level D&D party, it's something epic like that. And these are all easy just to insert into a journey. And, you could have a monster encounter, or you could have a exploration encounter, or you could have a social encounter. We've got a table of social encounters, like, I don't know, a knight looking for her lost love or something, wandering down the road or whatever. And all these build up to give you kind of a rich and kind of vibrant and interesting journey. And as you go through each tier, you have one of these encounters, either a monster encounter or an exploration or a social encounter in each region, or more if the GM wants, but a minimum of one in each region. And it just makes for a more rich, more in-depth, developed kind of environment. And with a fully developed exploration tier.
Well, that's very cool. So, is there anything else that has been put into exploration? I know that that's probably not the only thing.
Supply? There's supply. So
tell us about supply. There's supply is an important concept, and then there's this concept of the haven and some other stuff. Yeah, so tell us about
I think
that.
supply, a good analogy to use is think of it as the party's hit points on a journey. So while you've got sort of like 40 supply, being carried by your party by various people, you're fine. You take a long rest, you have some supply, move on. If you take a long rest and don't consume supply, you don't get the benefit of that long rest. So when you run out of supply, you basically stop running out of long rest as well. So that starts causing you problems. And one of the things about long rests is, so supply is kind of like the party hit points. While you've got supply, you're fine. When you run out,
right,
you're running into trouble. And there's class abilities to sort of hunt and forage for supply, or if you stop at an inn, you can resupply or whatever. But
so rangers or whatever the equivalent,
they're really good.
The
at that
foraging type become very important.
Yeah, they're very good. Okay. At that stuff. And so that's what supply does. And then havens, like you said. So there's two other things you track called fatigue and strife. So fatigue is basically what once was exhaustion. We've basically divided exhaustion into fatigue and strife. So fatigue is physical. It could be like minor wounds. It could be hunger. It could be just tiredness or whatever. It's all that stuff. Strife is sort of more mental. Think of like Frodo with the ring. As he kept walking, he was gaining levels of strife. Right. So that's kind of what that is. And you can only recover those at what's called a haven. And a haven is somewhere where you can have a long rest, get something to eat and drink, have a good sleep without any danger or any reasonable danger of being attacked.
So you have nothing to worry about. You can just
relax. It could be an inn or something. But a campsite where you're having to post watches, that's not a haven. You can't recover fatigue or strife at a campsite like that. You have to be at a safe place.
Well, and just to give an example of how A5E is the same, but yet more than O5E, like I was working on the magical item Bag of Beans.
Bag of Beans.
And I wrote a couple of really cool, because of supply and a couple of other things, we changed up Bag of Beans a little bit.
Yeah, because supply now exists, you do have to change a few things. Otherwise, like bags of holding can't carry food, for example.
But with the Bag of Beans, I changed up a couple of Mike was like, yeah, let's change up some of the supply stuff. But one of the original Bag of Beans results is you get a campfire. Mm-hmm. So we changed that to you get a campfire, but that campfire is a haven in a 10-foot radius.
Right, yeah.
Right. So here that's kind of and I changed the flames to green because I
some rangers can build temporary havens. A fighter, a higher level fighter, or what do we call the warlord in the end? So I think we've actually settled. I think we're going with marshal actually, because I did a poll and that was the most popular answer. But whatever it ends up being called, is able to sort of get the party to build a little temporary haven, and that remains there until you leave it for a week or more. So you can't keep building them every night because it takes 24 hours to build it. So you can't just build one every night and just ignore the haven rules. But if you stop for 24 hours and build one, it will remain there for a week. Or as long as you're in it, and a week after you leave it.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, so it's not like you're just saying, oh, it's we're going to introduce these new concepts and then you're going to be up the river. I mean, there's mechanics to, there's mechanics to balance things out. So, and it kind of makes, there's some classes that I get the impression that like every class has become more valuable in its own way. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I feel like every class is getting more stuff.
Well, they've all got exploration knacks now. So every class has exploration knacks, which basically makes them able to function in the exploration pillar. Otherwise, you've got a whole third of the game where half of the players are just watching, and we don't want that.
Twiddling their thumbs.
And that doesn't mean we've turned every class into a wilderness expert or anything like that. All of their exploration knacks are, relevant to their class. So, for like a wizard, right? Think of like Gandalf. He's sort of going up to Moria or something. So his exploration knacks, like whereas a ranger's exploration knacks might be like covering your tracks or finding the secret door or whatever. The wizard he knows stuff about the environment. He knows stuff about Moria. So, he knew that something had happened in Moria. He knew there was a secret door. He knows information about the stuff. So that's kind of like a wizard's exploration. So it still ties into the exploration pillar. You're still using it while exploring, and it's helping you explore.
Right, but they're just not throwing apples out of the woods when the Hobbits
he's not out there hunting.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, well that's cool. So now I definitely want to talk about classes more in depth. I'll have a break here in a second, and we'll resume on with the classes discussion. But is there any, like, what was the, I guess, sort of the thinking, why the emphasis on supply, and just to make it more interesting and engaging? Or did you feel that the experience of role-playing games was sort of lacking that? Like, what was the reasoning on that?
Yeah, like all of that, really. Basically, going back to Lord of the Rings again. In Lord of the Rings, it's not a journey to an adventure. The journey is the adventure.
Exactly.
So they're not traveling to a dungeon and they just skip past that and then they have an adventure in a dungeon. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, pretty much the entire thing is a journey. And we wanted to support that type of play. And not everyone wants to do that, and that's fine. Whatever. But if you do want your journey to be an adventure, or you want to flesh out the exploration pillar, then we've got support for it. If you don't want that, then don't use it.
So is it fair to say that you just wanted every aspect of gameplay to be as engaging as
so we just wanted, the game ostensibly has these 3 pillars. We're going to make sure these 3 pillars are well served. So the social pillar as well, that's a bit more interesting, because we did ask in our initial big survey, did people want social mechanics, a sort of social combat system? And pretty much overwhelmingly people said no, which is fine. I kind of agree with that as well. I didn't really want that, but I had to ask and check, and the answer was no.
Making a product for a customer.
The social pillar, but we are giving every class social abilities. However, some people go, I don't want my gruff dwarven fighter to have social abilities, thank you very much. But what they don't understand is being antisocial and gruff is a social ability.
Is a social ability.
That's a type of social ability. Antisocial is a type of social. So your dwarven fighter's ability to have a stern glare or to just ignore someone's charm or something is a social ability. It doesn't mean you've got social abilities, therefore you're charming. That's not what that means. Right. You could be intimidating. You could be whatever. They're all social abilities.
Right. Well, and there is there are times where being oblivious to something can be to your advantage. Right. So, like you said,
welcome to my life.
Charm you. So, now, I want to spend a little bit more time on exploration. Is there, what is the, because so many gamers and games and they, I'm fine with XP. I grew up with XP. I'm fine with, give me some XP. When I hit so many XP, I level up, all that. What is A5E? Do you feel it's equally focused on XP versus milestoning, or like, do you get XP for, if you're the wizard and you remember that the door to Moria is here? I mean, how does that work?
You'll get XP. Well, you can milestone if you like. Obviously, the option's in there because some people prefer that. But you get XP for overcoming a exploration challenge. So you come to this river with this broken bridge. You're trying to work out how to get across it. You make whatever checks you need to make. You try. They're quite free forms. You can come up with your own inventive solutions as well. It's not. Like 4E skill challenges were quite constrained. They're a lot looser than that. Mm-hmm. And then if you succeed, then you get XP. If you fail, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't continue on with the adventure, but you might lose some supply or something. Like while getting across there, some of your supply dropped into the raging torrent, or your mule ran off, or something like that. So there's costs.
So it'll never be a block.
It won't be a block, but there'll be a cost to finish.
So there's like a... Was it failing forward?
Yeah.
Like you can still fail forward, but
so you won't get the XP.
Okay.
And there'll be a cost.
Right.
Yeah.
And all your supply.
Or some of your supply.
Yeah. A bear will come out and eat all.
Or maybe you gain a level, depending on what it is. If you're trying to push through a blizzard, maybe you'll gain a level of fatigue. If you fail, but if you succeed, you don't, because you work out how to wrap up warm and keep going. Now
on the strife aspect, is that? There's a video game out there that's kind of owned the concept of mental consequences for the dangers of it's a Darkest Dungeon where your characters actually will develop neurosis and stuff like that. Does Strife take it to that level?
So the current draft of it, and Strife is still a little bit in flux, but the current draft of it has 5 levels like Fatigue has, because they're basically both exhaustion split into 2. So it's got 5 levels, and I think it's at level 3 you get a short-term mental effect, and at level 5 you get a permanent or long-term mental effect. I think. I'm trying to remember. I might be slightly wrong there, but something like that.
In O5E, there's short-term and permanent.
Yeah, that's those. Yeah. We're not calling them madness. We're calling them mental effects, but it's not.
There's mental effects. Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. That sounds really cool. And there's something else that I've heard you talk about that I think is really interesting, where monster encounters have levels of build-up to intrigue and tantalize the players. Like you'll see scat before you see the monster or something
on any monster entry. So say, it's also important how all this fits together. So say you're in a region which is, I don't know, we'll call it Majestic Mountains or something. I've forgotten what I think that's what we did call it, actually, Majestic Mountains. But, so you've got your encounter tables for tier 2 Majestic Mountains. And one of the encounters in that is, hill giants, maybe? So you've rolled it up and you've had an exploration encounter and you had to get across a ravine or something, or there was an avalanche. And now you've got a monster encounter and it says hill giants. So you're like, okay. So you open up hill giants in the monstrous menagerie and you'll see some interesting tables there. So you've got your usual stats for your hill giants and your usual descriptions for your hill giants. And you have some tables for hill giant names and you have tables for hill giant behavior and stuff like that. But you've also got 2 other important tables. So one is encounters. So depending on the challenge rating of your encounter, there'll be a bunch of different hill giant encounters listed there. So it might be 1 hill giant. It might be 3 hill giants plus 4, wargs or something. I don't know. So whatever your challenge rating is for the encounter you need, it's built. There's challenges built there for you. Did that make sense? What I just said? I was just babbling words at random there.
No, I think so. Yeah, it's like you roll an encounter and you know what the challenge rating of the encounter.
Yeah. So there's a list of different hill giant encounters by challenge rating, and then finally there's monster signs. So.
Monster signs. This is what I'm
monster
thinking.
signs.
Yeah, this sounds really fun.
When you roll an encounter, you don't necessarily immediately just meet the monster. Say it's a death knight, you might come up to like 1,000 heads on spikes, or you might notice that the sky is kind of like gloomy and purple and oppressive or something. Monster signs, or if it's an owl bear or a bear owl, you might
the bear.
You might notice claw marks in a tree at head height. Might be your first sign or something like that. Or you might find some, I don't know, bear owl droppings. Something, yeah.
Well, what I like about these, and I want to talk about them a little bit further, is the first sign usually it could be more than one monster. You know, you're like, oh, I see a bunch of heads on spikes. And some people are going to think, well, that's goblins or this or that. But as you encounter more and more signs, narrow it down.
And also there's, like, for every monster, we've got a little knowledge table as well. So once you have figured out what it is, you can roll on that to find out what you know about that monster as well. And every single one's got
that's really cool.
But yeah, I mean, you don't have to use the signs. You can literally just have the monster jump out on you.
Yeah. Right. But I love the idea of the signs. I mean, for player engagement, you know, it's like Stephen King says, the monster behind the door is always
you're just building up the anticipation.
Yeah. No, I think it's great.
Sometimes actually meeting the monster is actually the least interesting bit of that.
Yeah, it's anticlimactic at that point. Yeah. Yeah, because then, so, or it can be, depending on the monster. So, I mean, if it's a Tarrasque, that's probably not anticlimactic.
Probably going to ruin your day.
Probably. More than likely. So, I got to work a break in so I can talk about the show and sponsors and other cool stuff. But when we come back, there's more to talk about. I want to talk about, you've done extensive work breaking down and rebuilding the classes. And then you've got playtest documents. And like you said, you've mentioned your surveys. This isn't being done in a vacuum. You're seeking player input. And folks, you can go to levelup5e.com and learn about the game, including there's a lot of playtest documents on there that people can check out. So go to levelup5e.com or just search for Level Up Advanced 5e and you will find it. So I'm going to get us to a break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Russ Morrissey, a.k.a. Morrus of E.N. Publishing, and Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. All right, party peoples and true believers, let's do the break, and with some updates and stuff like that. First off, notes and links for every episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk can be found on the website /blog at shaneplays.com. That's ShanePlays.com. And so if you want to know more about the topic or just, missed something, is like, what was that website he mentioned or whatever, just go to shaneplays.com. Of course, our last show is archived on shaneplays.com. That was episode 237, which was the Geek News Cavalcade. Every now and then I just like to just collect a lot of fun geek news and topics together and just have a show about nothing but that. And that was the last show. The podcast goes out in a multitude of venues. First of all, of course, on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, YouTube, and more. And Shane Plays is also carried on SciFi.radio. SciFi.radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi. It used to be Krypton Radio, but now it's SciFi.radio. We do have a couple ways to support the show if you would like. I don't mention it a lot, but I do mention it during the break. And one is we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays, where you can support the show for as little as $1 per episode. And then I often push out on my Facebook page and on my Twitter accounts. Yes, that's accounts. I'll explain that here in a moment. I'll push out affiliate links from Humble Bundle and things like that. For example, recently on Humble Bundle, a couple of things that might have been interesting to you was there's a Stellaris game bundle going on right now. That's through March 24th. Today, as I'm recording this, is the 19th. And then there's a supermassive sci-fi, fantasy, and horror bundle of ebooks from Tachyon. So that's just a couple of examples of things I've sent out. You can get them for a stupid cheap price, and that also puts a little bit of money in Shane Plays Geek Talk's pocket, which I never complain. And also, I put out just news items that I think might be interesting to my listeners and people who follow my Twitter. So you can follow, there's two different accounts for you to choose from. One is Shane Plays, ShanePlays, and that's the one where I just constantly chatter, just every little thought that comes to my mind, and etc. And a lot of times not even related to the show. If you want just the meat and potatoes, show announcements and affiliate links and news items, that kind of thing, follow Shane Plays PR. That's ShanePlays PR. And last, but never ever least, I want to give out a big shout out to advertising partner Kursova Magazine, CIRSOVA, Kursova Magazine. It's a magazine of thrilling adventure and daring suspense, adventure fiction magazine. Think of it as the modern equivalent of the pulp fiction magazines, keeping that torch alive. Don't forget to keep up with Kursova Magazine, CIRSOVA Magazine. That's it for the show notes. Let's get back to the main show and keep talking about Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. Thank you so much for listening. All right, getting back to our discussion with Russ Morrissey, a.k.a. Morrus, talking about Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, which is it is a standalone game, tabletop role-playing game that is on the way. There will be a Kickstarter hopefully over the summer, at which point I'll do another episode talking about that. But I just there's so much cool stuff going on here. I wanted to kind of introduce people to it and whet their appetite to all the coolness that is Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. But again, it's a standalone game, but it's completely backwards compatible with, as we're calling it, original 5e. So the current 5e system from Wizards of the Coast D&D. So you get the best of both worlds. And Advanced 5e is it just adds a lot more options and depth. I'm not sure that it's more crunchy or necessarily more complex, but it just adds a lot more options and adds a lot more.
So it's not more difficult. That's what I'd say. There's nothing in there that we've added something that's really complicated. Everything that's in there is just the same difficulty level as O5E.
Right. But you just get more options and more depth, to the game. So, and it's really cool. And you've got, I'll link in the show notes for this episode. You've talked about it a couple of times on your podcast. Really great discussions. So I definitely recommend people check it out. And there's on levelup5e.com, I believe there's a sign up button, right? So people can get updates.
Yeah. So you stick your email address in there, and basically every time we have a bit of news or a playtest document or a playtest survey, or if you want to be told when the Kickstarter is coming, because you don't want to miss that, you can stick your email address in there, and we will keep you. It's basically about one email a week, maybe two, usually one. So it's not, you won't get spammed of stuff.
You mentioned something I want to talk about is the playtests. Tell us a little bit about the playtest documents that are out there right now. I think that people can go to this website and find playtest documents. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was asking, well, what is it? And, what is Advanced 5th Edition? And he downloaded the Wizard playtest and was immediately interested in the knacks that you mentioned. Those, I guess, the exploration knacks. So there are, let's look at, and what class have you put out that was the most popular playtest so far? I remember you had one that was overwhelmingly the most popular.
I think that was probably the Berserker at the time, because I think people really liked what we did with the Barbarian. And it's Barbarian is kind of more of a background than it is a class. If you think of a class is kind of more a set of abilities, and your culture and background and stuff tell you whether or not you're a barbarian. So I really liked the idea of the barbarian's defining feature is the fact that it has a rage mechanic. That's pretty much what the defining feature of that class is, isn't it? So why does it have to be a wilderness warrior in a loincloth to have a rage mechanic? When also I like the idea of just kind of this sort of elven Queensguard in shining silver mithril armor, plate armor with big two-handed swords, types of thing. But that obviously doesn't fit in with the image of a barbarian. So we call it the Berserker, and you can choose between the barbarian sort of direction or what we call the Juggernaut direction, which is kind of the armored kind of big, heavy, smashing things kind of version.
Right. Yeah, the big Brutus. That's another thing, first of all, I want to remind people again, go to levelup5e.com and check out the playtest documents and the surveys. And I mean, you can see stuff in front of you. It's not finalized yet, but it'll give you a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, there's 12 playtest documents there so far. Going back over the last 5 months, so some of them are quite old, and the surveys have been done on them, and the final result is a bit different to what's on there now.
Right. So is it you put out the playtest document and then you take a survey?
Yeah. Later? So the survey is usually a few days later, and then the survey is left there, and the playtest document are left there. Well, indefinitely, they're still there. So. And then a month or two later is when we go back to it and revisit it with fresh eyes, take all the survey data, and by then we'll have had hundreds or thousands of survey responses. Take all that survey data, and then we make what changes we need to make to that playtest document.
So a couple of the other things you've done that have received a lot of attention and you've gone really in depth with the team on is one. classes. I mean, every class has come under intense scrutiny. What's good? What do we want to change? What do we want to add? In some cases, the class names have been changed.
So there's 3 of them. And each one of them, it was changed for the exact same reason, is because the class name told you too much about the sort of culture and background of the character rather than the abilities of the character. And we wanted people to be able to have more of a choice. So like the monk was one, when basically we don't want every unarmed specialist fighter to have to have the trappings of kind of like an Eastern martial arts theme. What if you want, you can have that, that's fine. But what if you want it to be some sort of giant, brutish, red-bearded pit fighter who rips the arms off his opponents in the cage or whatever? That is also a totally viable sort of unarmed combatant build. But monk just doesn't work as a name for it. So we called it the adept, and then you've got a choice.
After much discussion.
After much
that
discussion,
one had a lot of discussion. Yeah. And I think adept is a good name for it. Basically, it's somebody who is so good at unarmed combat that they're sublime compared to whoever else they're fighting. So it could be the typical, Eastern monk, or it could be the pit fighter, but it's somebody who is so good. They're like on almost like a artistic
they've trained
level
their body
with
to
how well they right. And I can't remember. They still get. I don't remember if it's been landed on what it's going to be called yet, but key-like abilities. See, but I think we were going with focus
exertion.
The last I heard. So is it exertion? Yeah. So you could still do really cool stuff. It's just not under, like you said, the coat of paint of, Eastern martial artist with like key points and stuff like that. But you can still build incredibly cool unarmed fighters. So, and what I land on is sublime. You're a sublimely good unarmed fighter. And that's what distinguishes you from just being an unarmed fighter class. Right, you're on a whole different level. So what are the other 2 classes that Barbarian became
and
Berserker,
Paladin became Herald, because a Paladin is a very specific thing. It's like one of Charlemagne's shining knights. It's very, very specific. Again, it just told you too much about what that was. And while we want you to be able to make that the shining knight with the lance, the holy knight with the lance in armor. Right. We also want you to be able to make other types of holy warrior as well. So again, that was just just changing it just so it's a broader name, and then you can specialize however you want within that.
So let's take a more traditional, they're all the traditional classes, even though they have different names, but each one has, like I said, been sort of come under the scrutiny and tweaked or added or whatever. So let's just take a fighter.
That's a good one. It's a good choice.
What did you do with the fighter?
So the fighter was where we first introduced the combat maneuvers. So it's not only fighters that get combat maneuvers. Lots of classes get them, but the fighter gets the most and has access to more types of combat maneuvers. And combat maneuvers, if you think of them, they're sort of like, they take the place of kind of like spells for martial characters, but they're not spells, they're not magic, they're physical combat maneuvers. So you've got your basic ones that everyone can do, which is just like your standard trip and shove, and the ones that are just in the O5E player's handbook that everyone can do. So they're the basic ones, and anyone can do those, or try and do those, and they've got access to those. But you can choose a whole load of other ones. I'm trying to remember what they are offhand, but
so it's almost like, again, they're not spells, but they're
physical abilities. There's nothing magical about them. Yeah. So they're kind of like sort of disarms or teamwork abilities where you can be back to back and get an AC bonus, or where you can leap through the air to attack your opponent, or trips and throws. So a massive range. They're divided into a whole bunch of different traditions. Each tradition is just a different kind of style. So there's the biting Zephyr. Is that how you pronounce that word? Zephyr?
I say Zephyr.
Okay.
But we talking about the wind?
Yeah, that's probably it then. Yeah, which is like an archery one. So you get things like double shots.
Now remember, I'm an American, so I don't...
Yeah, I've never heard that word said out loud in my life, so I've got no idea. It's one of those, like there's so many words, especially in D&D, where you see them written down, you never ever hear them said out loud.
Right, you only say them. And what I love is when somebody tweets or contacts Wizards of the Coast, and they say, how do you say this word? And they say, well, you can say however you want. It's like, no, you guys wrote this word. Anyway,
so the biting Zephyr tradition involves, arrow volleys or rapid fires or double shots or, point blank shots and, a load of maneuvers you can do with arrows. Or you can staple someone to the wall with your arrow or whatever.
Right. So it gives you those cool things.
Yeah. So that's what maneuvers are. And you get a pool of exertion points, which you can spend on doing those maneuvers, basically. And the more powerful maneuvers cost more exertion points.
So how many different classes get combat maneuvers?
About a third to a half of them, I think.
Like fighter,
anything that sounds like it should does. But the number, like fighter can access all of the traditions. The fighter is basically the one that's really good at all combat maneuvers.
So that's his thing. That's where or his or her
so the
thing.
fighter's good at the mounted
shine.
ones. He's good at the ones that have a shield. He's good at the ones that have two weapons. He's good at the ones that involve standing there and just being really solid and just he's
right. Well, I like the idea of combat maneuvers because I'm going to be real clear here. I like 5e. I played 5e since it's come out. My players like 5e. It's a very popular edition. But every edition has things you like or don't like. And one of the things I don't like about 5e is by the rules. Now, I can always, as a GM, I can whip out whatever I want. But by the rules, when I have a new player, especially just doing a fighter or something like that, they're like, I want to do a called shot, or I want to leap and grab his legs, or I want to, and I'm like, there's not really, rules for that. And especially my only pet peeve with 5e is grappling. Grappling is practically, in my opinion, useless in 5e. So hopefully some of these combat maneuvers are going to allow some grappling type of
So everyone's got a maneuver DC. So when you do a combat maneuver on somebody, they make a save against your maneuver DC. So grappling, I'm trying to remember now. I was looking at this document like last week, but I've looked at so many other ones since. We've got rules for like jumping on top of big monsters and things like that.
Right.
And we've got rules for grappling, and a lot of these things have definitely been not streamlined, but made, I think, a bit better. And they're more intuitive and also allow you to do more things.
So the combat maneuver stuff runs in parallel to the traditional attack. It doesn't replace hits and stuff like that, but it's kind of a parallel system while you're, because it sounds like you have exertion points and you have this and that. And like if I want to do a combat maneuver on somebody, it's different from an attack.
Yeah, so I'm just calling it up right now. So here we go. Combat maneuvers. Right, so you get a maneuver save DC, which is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your strength or dexterity modifier. So that's a flat number. Okay. So a big monster is going to have a maneuver save DC up towards 20, and a small one is going to have a much, much smaller.
So when you execute a maneuver, you're not executing it against...
No, they're making a save.
Execute it. Okay. All right. That sounds neat. I like that. So it's not spells, but it gets you a list of options that's almost like choosing spells for a more martial type character.
And then you've got your basic maneuvers. So they are disarm, grab on, which is you can't grapple a creature that's like 2 size categories bigger than you. You can't grapple an elephant because that's just silly.
But you can
grab onto it. You can jump onto its back or climb onto a limb or whatever. So you can do that. You can grapple, which is nice and simple and easy to use. You can knock down, overrun, and shove. So they're the basic ones that anybody can do. You don't have to...
Everybody can do those maneuvers.
And all you do is...
And those aren't attacks. They become maneuvers.
So
They're no longer attacks.
use an attack action usually for them. So if you're going to grapple someone, you use the attack action and they make a save against your maneuver DC.
I like it. So, all right. And I want to, because we've got about 10 minutes left here, and then I need to wrap up. So I feel like we could camp out on combat maneuvers for a long time.
I mean, it's tons of them.
The idea of it.
40 or 50 of them. There's loads of them.
I want to touch on, and before we wrap up, I know there was a lot of discussion on how to approach Ranger. And then also I want to, obviously combat maneuvers is a big change to the combat system, but I want to see if there's any other, major changes to combat or social that you want to talk about. But where did you end up landing on Ranger? I remember there was a lot of discussion on where should the Ranger fit, should he even have, or should the class have magic? And I mean, I know there was
we did a survey right at the start, and people said they would like to see a Ranger without magic. Like, all of his knowledge is about the wilderness and expertise in the wilderness and herbalism and nature and animals and stuff like that. And so...
Well, if you think about it, that makes sense, because the archetype of the Ranger as we know it is Strider.
Basically, really. That's how I say it. So it's Aragorn or it's Drizzt, isn't it? Other two. Right.
So, and Aragorn was not running around casting magic. Now, he had herbalism, and because he was a born king, evidently he could do certain stuff, or had, but other than that, he was not running around casting
that's
divine
not saying
magic.
The Rangers can't do magic. So the core, it's just that the magic isn't in the core class. The magic is going to be in the archetype. So the core class doesn't have the magic, but you choose the archetype, and if you want your spellcasting Ranger, you just choose that archetype, and there you go. You've got it.
So is the archetype, the main archetype, does it come with the combat maneuver to set in the shadowy corner smoking a pipe, observing the common room? Social ability. Yeah. Now, do you have social abilities that are equivalent to combat maneuvers? Has it gone that deep yet on the or at all?
Yeah. So social abilities are in the classes themselves, and sort of between level 1 and 10, you'll probably pick 2. So maybe, say, at 5th level, you'll pick one of 3 options, and maybe at 7th level or 9th level, you might pick another one of 3 options. So social abilities are baked into the class, rather than being a separate subsystem. And they range from sort of, like I said earlier, like the charmy sort of stuff, to the more stubborn sort of stuff, to the social resilience, to impassiveness, to intimidation.
And so it's built into the class. It's not a list. You have a class-based list, not an open list to choose from. Okay. And on the, is there anything like that you've, other than combat maneuvers, have you fiddled with combat very much? You mentioned something about making a little bit more tactical.
Well, the combat maneuvers is mainly that. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Okay.
I think we tweaked a little bit with surprise and initiative, a tiny bit. I think it was to deal with sucker punches and stuff. When you're in a situation and then the players go, "Oh, I attack him," like that, and then the GM goes, "Right, let's roll for initiative," and then the other guy goes first. And you're like, yeah, but I attacked him.
But I...
So we kind of like, combat, I think, smoothed over that little sort of road bump in the initiative system, which was, it is conceivable that the other guy, even though you initiated it, is so fast that he saw what you were doing and reacted first. But you get advantage on your initiative roll. Is how we handled that.
So. Oh, okay. That's not... Yeah, see, now that's a great example of... The same concepts from fifth edition are in there, but it just adds some more depth. Everybody understands advantage. You just get advantage. So
it makes it more likely. So it just gives you, but it's still not. The other guy still can beat you to the punch. Yeah,
still not guaranteed. All right. Now, what about feats?
We haven't got there yet, actually. I don't think we've even started feats yet, but they're pretty much going to be just like O5E.
Okay, so that you're not just going to say. So it sounds like you're not just saying, well, you can use feats from O5E.
You can use them from O5E, or you can use R1s.
But you're actively going to introduce new feats.
I think most of them will be very similar to the ones in O5E, just kind of renamed. or rewritten slightly.
Okay.
But
and what about alignment? I know alignment is a core part of D&D, but I've seen a lot of discussions about what to do or how to approach alignment and the concept of
individual
alignment.
Creature, intelligent, sentient individual creature can be any alignment because it's sentient and intelligent and it can do that, unless it's a supernatural thing. So like a demon is supernaturally evil. A Death Knight is supernaturally evil. They will be evil. But a goblin, although they'll probably be evil, because most goblins probably are,
but they don't have to be.
Yeah, is what we're saying. So we're not saying all goblins are evil, but we are saying all demons are evil.
So you're saying like a lot of goblin culture tends toward evil, but the goblin itself does not have to be evil. So you could run into a village of good goblins.
In theory, it'd be unlikely, but in theory, you can. The system allows for that.
Okay. But is the alignment, because I know I saw a lot of discussion about, it seems like the alignment system is going to be, you've got the alignment axis, lawful.
Yeah, we're not changing any of that.
Chaotic. Evil. Okay, you're not changing any of that. Okay. And man, I hate to do this to you, bringing this up when we're about to wrap, but you've done, I think now that maybe I'm thinking you put some stuff out there about races and heritage, and you got really good feedback, or maybe I'm getting confused, but you've overhauled the races and heritage to the point that like you're ahead of the pack. Like a lot of the stuff that you're doing, like we're actually seeing coming out of other companies, not that they're copying you, but that it's, you're ahead of the curve there. So if you're an elf, you kind of pick and choose your background, right?
So basically,
your heritage.
You look at a race entry in O5E of, say, an elf, and it has a lot of biological stuff in there, which all elves are going to share.
Right.
Then a lot of cultural stuff in there, which not necessarily all elves are going to share. So it says, they're trained to be really good with a longsword and a longbow. Are they? What if this elf grew up with dwarves? Then he's probably really good with axes and hammers.
And a crossbow.
So we took the cultural stuff, the learned stuff, split it off from the biological stuff, and you choose them separately. So you can choose the cultural, the elf biological stuff, and the cultural kind of wood elf cultural stuff, and put them together, and you've got your standard wood elf, just like you always had. Or you can mix and match.
Right. So that does happen. I have players that was like, I'm this, but I was raised by that, so, and in fact, my current campaign has a player who's doing that in 5e. So they were like a tabaxi, but they were raised by whatever. And then we went to Chult, and all of a sudden they're seeing tabaxi. So they're absolutely.
And then we've got a whole lot of more generic sort of cultures as well, like a cosmopolitan culture. So if you're an elf and you were raised in a big city, you're probably not going to have a lot of forestry skills. So,
but you might have streetwise.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say it's modular?
Yeah.
Like the racial, like the biological traits are like, well, you're an elf. So, but all the other stuff is sort of modular. And you just pick the module you want.
That's not to say you can't use an O5E race instead. You can use either. So you can use we call it heritage and culture, and you mix those two together.
Heritage and culture.
Or you can use an O5E race, or whatever the name is they're using. Lineage, is it they're calling it these days? I can't remember. But so
heritage is replacing race.
Yeah, heritage is the biological bit. Culture is the learned bit. Yeah.
And then culture. Okay, well that's cool. And what is? Have you had really good feedback?
Yeah, people seem to like that a lot. Yeah. That scored really well. I think the important thing was we had to make sure you could still build the original things from O5E. Right. Because if you couldn't do that, then people would go, okay, it's not D&D anymore. If I can't actually have a wood elf anymore, then it's not D&D. So you can have a wood elf. You just have to choose elf.
Right. And that's the trick when you're adding complexity, but you want to make it backwards compatible. That's a wire to wall. I guess. So what have you? Just to wrap up, what has been your favorite part of the project so far, and what has been the most challenging part?
Keeps changing. A few weeks ago, I would have said monsters was the best part, my favourite part, because I was really admiring Cassandra's Green Dragon, and it's awesome. We put a preview up of that. Frank, our layout artist, did all the layout on that one monster, and we put it up there, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And I just like the way the dragon's just more in depth, more interesting, more options. It's not just a bag of hit points with a couple of attacks. It's just really...
Yeah, well, there was a lot of discussion on the honeyed words. The honey.
Especially when you combine
words.
that with its ability to camouflage in natural surroundings, so it can literally, you can't see it, and it's whispering in your mind and getting you to do things and stuff. And then we talked about the Black Dragon, and we were talking with, I don't know how the Black Dragon is going to come out, but I started thinking of a Black Dragon in terms of a horror vibe, like Aliens.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that would be scary.
Yeah, so they're going to have their own, they're not just going to have a different color, they have their own unique feel and plays and all that. So that's really cool. But now it's keeping like layer actions and legendary abilities and for backwards compatible. Yeah. Now the Green Dragon came out really well. Okay, last thing I'll point out here, and what's been the most challenging aspect of the project so far?
Strongholds, maybe still working on that, is quite hard. But I think we're nearly there. Strongholds basically are feats, in a sense. Like, mechanically, they're feats. They give you an ability. So if you have a castle, or you have a sacred grove, or you have a wizard's tower, or a lab, or something, that when you're out adventuring, you've got an ability that you can use because you own that stronghold.
Because you have that. That's nice. Yeah, and you've also done something similar with the followers.
And the followers are similar. They're kind of like daily spells you could use almost. That's an analogy. They're not spells. They are followers. But
it's a very loose analogy.
Yeah. But it's just like once a day, your follower will do something for you that's really useful.
Well, man, it sounds super cool. I got to wrap us up. Thanks again, and remind us, you're hoping to have a Kickstarter over the summer?
Level Up?
Or no, that was Awfully Cheerful.
Should be the summer. Level Up later in the year. It depends on when it's done. I mean, like all these things, when it's done, it's done. And
when it's done, it's done.
There's so many variables in making these. You can't accurately. I mean, we're hoping to have the writing done by early summer. And all the writing.
It's a tremendous amount of writing. Like I said, I'm in a relatively small role, and I've already written close to 10,000 words.
You should see how much I've paid for.
Payday!
Tens of thousands of dollars so far.
All right. So, but basically, it's like, have you seen The Agony and the Ecstasy, where he's like, "When will you make an end, Michelangelo?" And he's like, "It'll be finished when it's finished." It's him and the Pope going back and forth over the Sistine Chapel. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, Russ, thanks so much. And folks, if you want to know more about Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, go to levelup5e.com. I'll put some links in the show notes. Sign up for updates. Check out the playtest documents. We really just scratched the surface. I mean, there's so much. And a lot of the stuff hasn't even been written yet. I just wanted to kind of tease you with some of the cool stuff that's coming. And remember, it's fully backwards compatible with the current 5th edition or a standalone game. So it's just going to be super cool. Russ, thanks for your time. Enjoy your game tonight. And I hope you get to see Zack Snyder's 4-hour sprawling, amazing version of Justice League.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, I got to go. But thank you so much again. And I'm excited keeping up with all of the stuff that E.N Publishing is doing. I don't know how you do it.
Neither do I. I don't know how I do it either.
All right. And on that note, I got to give you the bad joke of the week.
Oh, please do.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, damn.
Yeah. What do you call a one-legged hobgoblin?
I don't know, Shane. Tell me, what do you call a one-legged hobgoblin?
A hopgoblin. I wish people could see your face. All right, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
It's been a pleasure.
Shane
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.